This is an interview with J. Krishnamurti by Lex Hixon in New York, 1982.
Rolling. I'm sitting in a hotel room in New York City, and it's the end of March 1982. And in front of me is J. Krishnamurti, a person who I've admired since childhood and read his writings. He was the first representative of deeper truth that I can remember reading. And he's touched so many generations of my family and of our culture in America and in all over the world, that is with a lot of gratitude that I have a chance to talk with you finally, face to face. I thought that the best way to proceed would be to give the listeners some sense of the direct process of investigation, with which you have helped to clarify so many people's minds. And this process is, as I've seen it unfold during the last 3 days, during these 3 days of seminars that we've been going through with Krishnaji, is a kind of careful, step-by-step approach to truth in which one gets closer and closer, and Krishnaji is always slowing people down, because we have the tendency to want to jump immediately to some sort of conclusion rather than examining step by step, and also reminding us constantly of the need to feel an authentic urgency of the inquiry, and not simply be involved in speaking words and playing with words, but to really come into contact with the reality that the words point to. Maybe we could just begin to ask about the word inquiry itself. What is it to inquire?
So there are many problems all over the world which are more or less similar. Problems of starvation, problems of war, and the general degeneration of human beings all over the world, violence and so on. I think we ought to look into all this, not intellectually, not romantically, or taking any particular point of view, either Christian or Hindu or some sectarian attitude, but rather inquire into this very complex existence of human beings, which are becoming more and more dangerous. There is the nuclear threat of war, which I doubt will ever take place. I hope it won't. But there is a threat of war, perhaps not in this country so much as in Europe. There is this weight of the Eastern pressure.
You've pointed out that these complex problems that we are faced with, which appear to be outside of us, really are reflections of internal problems in man's thinking process.
You can't have social order if there is no order within each one of us. If we are not, if we are violent, if we are envious, greedy, all the rest of that, we produce a society which it is. We have created this society. And we have to change it. Not the politicians, not the engineers. As human beings, we have to bring about order in ourselves.
But as you point out also, which was so helpful, that we need to be sensitive to the world's problems in order to truly to be sensitive to our internal problems. Because if we turn directly to our own internal problems, we become self-centered and
That's right. So you have to be aware of the world, what is happening in the world, be sensitive to what is happening in the world, not take sides, Russia against this country or that country, but see what actually human lives are, divided up religiously, nationally, economically, and socially. Be aware of that sensitively. That is the mirror in which I see oneself.
You said that this sensitivity to humanity for you is a very intense fact. It's and that we must approach it that way that this vast movement of life is so. It's such a marvelous thing to be alive to, but that how does one develop the intensity of really, instead of thinking abstractly about the world's problems and the complexity, to actually encounter it?
I don't think you can develop it, but when you don't when you see you have some pain, you don't develop the idea to be free of it. You want to be free of it. So the national division and all the divisions that are going on is preventing human beings living happily. There is no global interrelationship at all. That's the only solution to all our problems, economic and social and war. But it doesn't exist. Nobody is interested in that. Only what we are interested, each one wants to fulfill, wants to do something of his own desires, self-centered, and all the rest of it.
But if we can't develop this intensity, then to some extent it must be already there as a possibility.
No, sir, it's not already there, but when you see things as they are, not look at it from an American, Russian, or certain point of view, you see things as they are. And you become, by becoming aware of that, you become sensitive naturally.
So the nature of awareness is to see things as they are?
As they are, not distorted by prejudice, by opinion, by conclusions, by ideals, just to see things as they are. How Russia is going on arming, America is going on, every national country is doing this. That's a fact. See it as it is. Why are human beings doing this?
As you explained earlier, the human being has this peculiar tendency to create ideals and to create non-facts, as you put it, rather than just allowing awareness as it naturally operates to see things as they are. Why do we create these non-facts? Why do
because, we? Because the easiest way to escape from what is. Because we don't know how to face what is. We don't understand actually what is. We have always this idea of what is and what should be. The what should be is unreal, non-fact. So this tendency to escape from actuality, not face it, is at the root of this problem.
Why does this tendency to escape arise if our awareness is...
We don't know how to solve this problem. We don't know how to stop the war, of any war. So we talk about United Nations, we talk about having peaceful ideals, we talk about non-violence, but the fact is we don't want to stop wars.
Or as you pointed out in the internal dimension, the fact is that we don't really want to to be free from fear and to be free from conflict.
Yes, that's just it, sir.
But can we inquire as to how this tendency arises? Because if it's natural to awareness to see things as they are.
No, it's not natural. We have so conditioned to accept things as they are. Accept things like war, like violence, greed, envy, and all those things. We accept them. We say that's the most natural instinct of man. And out of that naturalness, we have created this rotten society.
But underneath that imposed kind of naturalness, there is the real naturalness, which is just to observe things as they are, just awareness, just observing.
That's not even natural, sir. Our minds, our brains refuse to see things as they are. Because we are so conditioned to escape. We're so conditioned to avoid any kind of disturbance, deep disturbance. And so we postpone, let the wars go on. It's a natural thing for human beings to kill each other. And because we don't know what to do, we invent non-violence. Or some outside agency like God or some other person is going to solve all of our problems, which is also childish.
The question then arises, how are we to get back into tune with that awareness which simply observes things as they are?
That means looking at ourselves in the mirror of society. The society is what we have created. All the human beings throughout the world with their grandparents past, we have created this society. That society is the expression of each one of us. That's a fact. Now, do we acknowledge this fact? Do we say, this is so, unless I change? Fundamentally, I cannot possibly stop wars or change society. We don't want to say that. We don't want to change it fundamentally.
So the first step is to see the conditioning process clearly, to
face
that
conditioning which has created this ugly society.
And then simply seeing that clearly, spontaneously will arise this fundamental change you're talking about.
No, sir. There is no spontaneity. Spontaneity can only exist when one is free. But we're not free.
Right.
We are bold. We live in prisons of each one's own making. And to be aware that I am living in my own conditioning as a Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Jew, and all the rest of it, communist, socialist, we have created this conditioning, and we are unaware of this conditioning. If you become aware of this conditioning, then the trouble begins. Real trouble begins, which we don't want to face. Because it means unconditioning the mind from all the tradition, from your nationalism, religious beliefs, faiths, which are all inventions. Then you are real face to face with something that you have to resolve. You can't just sit back and talk about it.
So it takes courage, actually, to look clearly at conditioning.
Not courage. I won't use, if I may suggest, I won't use that word courage. One should have courage to observe what actually is going on. You don't have to have courage when you have toothache. You go to the dentist. similarly, when you are facing this catastrophe out there, which each one of us has created, you become aware of it, that you are responsible for it. None of us want to feel that responsibility. A global responsibility. Because your consciousness is not yours. It's the global human consciousness. So if you are concerned with the tragedy of this world, the misery, confusion, sorrow of this human beings, then you are involved in resolving it, not playing with words and theories. You are concerned. You care. You are responsible for all that you do.
So could one say that taking a single word for that compassion, some sort of compassion or fundamental concern for others is the basis
not
of...
for others. You're
Yes, clarify that.
When there is the ending of suffering, there is love. It's not, that love, you don't say, I care. There is love. It's like a perfume of a flower. It's there. You see, we have always this idea that we must cultivate something. Cultivate to be good. You can't cultivate to be good. You can't cultivate to love. Love is when selfish is not. When you're not angry, jealous, all the rest of it. That the other thing is.
And there's no way that the limited self can bring about this state of affairs.
No, sir, because whatever that limited self does will be always limited, naturally.
So you're giving us you're proposing that there is a complicated state of limitation, which is the world, the external and the internal world, and then there's this state of love,
no, sir,
which is not limited. It seems that you're proposing two universes floating side by side.
No, sir, no. First of all, sir, the world, what is happening in the world is created by each human being. And it's like a tide going out and coming in. That is, we have created the world, and the world then shapes us. It's a constant movement, interrelating with the world and oneself. And first of all, to realize that the world is not different from me. The wars, the brutality, the anger, the jealousy, suffering is me. And in my limited action, I create this horror. That's a fact. So either one accepts as things are, as most people do, or you begin to inquire into the whole process, why human beings have become what they are. Brutal, violent, stupid, nationalistic, tribal glorification, which is nationalism. Why have they become like this after a million years? What's wrong? They have not changed, basically. The primitive man was jealous, anxious, frightened. We are just like that. So one begins to inquire why. Why have human beings become like this? Educated, so-called educated, living in affluent society, the rich people getting richer and the poor are getting poorer all over the world. Why? What's wrong? And there are groups, broken up groups all over the world, belong to some guru, some phony people, sects all over the world. Why? Is it that we are seeking safety? Is there safety in nationalism? Is there safety in separatism? Each man thinking, I'm going to be safe. Struggling, protecting, thinking he's isolated. He's not. So that may be one of the causes of this conflict. Isolation breeds conflict.
So if one begins to...
just look, isolation breeds conflict. And national isolation is conflict. When I form a group or commune, it creates conflict, bound to.
But when one feels that one is the whole world, or one is all of humanity somehow is contained in one's...
Either that's a verbal statement or an actuality, which means tremendous responsibility for what you're doing, what you're thinking.
But human beings are capable of that responsibility.
Obviously, if they want to. As most people don't want to. Or if they realize that they're responsible, they want to form an organization, an institution for action. You follow? And they go off. They don't realize that they are responsible, not a group, not an organization. They are responsible. If each one of us in this country felt responsible for what is happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Beirut, what's happening in all the places where there's starvation, hunger. We are responsible because we have separated America, Russia, India. You follow?
Yes.
That's why there is this terrible conflict.
Well, let's assume that someone is capable of feeling this responsibility and feels it. Does it have to issue in a particular action, or is it an insight?
So you can't assume such a tremendous reality.
Well, I can assume it in the case of yourself. I can, at least in one human being, in your case, I can assume that you feel this responsibility, or else you wouldn't be able to talk about it.
I wouldn't. I'm not a hypocrite, I hope. I wouldn't talk about any of these things if I really didn't live it.
Exactly. So at least we can assume in one case that someone has this full sense of responsibility, and so the question remains: does this issue in some sort of action, or is it?
Of course, it must issue in action. I think if I'm married, I have children. My responsibility is to those children. Well, how I educate them, what kind of education? Whether the education is conditioning them. Whether they can stand in their own vital strength and not be driven in a particular direction. If I love them, I don't want them to be killed or be killed. And it's a holistic way of living. It's not partial.
But the example you gave, of course, by nature of examples, had to be partial, because if one has 2 or 3 or 4 children, it simplifies that kind of responsibility about finding the right education and feeding them correctly. But if you've taken responsibility for the entire human race,
yes, sir,
then a different order of action has to come into being.
Just look at it. If don't belong, if one doesn't belong to any nation, to any group, to any religion, organized religion, with all their circus, if it doesn't belong to anything, then you are a human being, aren't you? Without any label. You are what you are. And you realize what you are has created all this ugliness. So I start, is it possible for one human being to radically transform himself? That is a responsibility.
So that is the essential action that
is tremendous actions.
It's
that involves my relationship if I'm married to my wife. That relationship, whether there is fear, there is anxiety, all that is involved. So essentially, we are self-centered human beings. And from that self-centered human beings, we act. And therefore it's always the self-hiding behind all kinds of names and organizations and all the rest of it. And we're talking of being absolutely selfless. That is my responsibility, because otherwise I can't bring about a change in myself or in the world.
But the problem remains that we are a fully conditioned self, so there's no way to make that self into something selfless.
Of course not.
It appears to be an impasse.
No, sir. Impasse exists only when we don't observe the whole movement of the self. Right? What is the self? What is its craving? What is it doing in the world? Suppose I'm selfish, self-centered. What are its actions? Its actions will be self-centered actions. Therefore separative. Therefore, I am against you. I am against everybody, including my wife, including my children, because I'm self-centered. I may talk about love and responsibility and all that nonsense, but as long as I'm self-centered, I must act in that narrow, limited way. Now, is it possible, living in this world, not to be self-centered? Which means, do I realize the consequences, observe the activities of self-centeredness? Observe, which doesn't mean great brain, just observe what I do. How I hate people. I get easily angry. I wound people, I'm violent. I can observe all that. And inquire into why am I violent? What is violence? Conformity, imitation, and so on. It's a very complex problem, being violent. So I observe it. And if I say, through pure observation, the thing comes to an end.
Who is it that is making this pure observation? It's certainly not the conditioned self.
Yes, the conditioned self cannot be purely aware. It's conditioned awareness. So I inquire why I'm conditioned. What are the factors that condition me?
But it seems to me that an awareness which can observe the full conditioning and inquire why it exists, that awareness itself is not conditioned.
We are doing it now.
So to some extent,
I'm conditioned. Conditioned as a Hindu, as a Buddhist, or as an American, or Catholic, Protestant, what you will. I'm conditioned. I'm conditioned because For 2,000 years, Christianity is doing tremendous propaganda. Right? I'm conditioned. I believe what they tell me.
But if you, as a Christian, let's say, if you take a clear look at the fact that you are totally conditioned as a Christian and see it for what it is,
see the consequences of it.
But being able to do that is itself a non-conditioned act.
No, it's just so. See the consequences of, say, for instance, attachment. I'm attached to my wife. If I'm married, I'm attached to my wife. What are the sequence? What are the movement of that attachment? I'm afraid to lose her, right? I hold on to her. I'm afraid of my loneliness, what I will do without. So it is logical, sequential thought. Attachment must lead to that.
But, and I accept that analysis and all the complexity of it. But my question still remains: to observe a series of numbers, one has to be outside the series in order to identify it as the series of numbers. To observe this complexity of conditioning, doesn't one have to be able to step outside of conditioning in order to look at it?
No. Sir, just a minute. I'm conditioned from childhood to be a Hindu, right? And your ex is conditioned to be a Christian, believe in all that stuff, and I believe in all my old stuff, the tradition, all that. Now, can't I be aware of that without going through all kinds of rigmarole? I'm conditioned as a Hindu.
I see. So it is...
See, I'm conditioned as a Hindu. That man is conditioned as a Christian, believing various forms of his own illusions, as I am. So we can see that. It doesn't need unconditioned mind to see the obvious.
I see. So the conditioned mind looks at itself and sees that it is conditioned.
We are doing it now.
I see.
So from my point, aren't you making it too difficult?
Well, you've been thinking about it for so many more years than I have. I hope someday to be as simple and direct as you are about it.
It seems so simple. I am conditioned as an Arab, right? Believing all my stuff. And the ex is conditioned as a Jew. So we are at each other's throat. But we are human beings, not... It's so clear.
But the matter that brings the difficulty is the very simple question, but very difficult how to do it, is how do we just be the human being and stop being the Arab or the Jew?
Don't be an Arab. Don't think in Arabic phraseology. Don't become Arab. Be a human being. Like I would tell my friends, forget your beastly Hinduism. Throw it all out. Let's be human beings. Which is, don't be self-centered.
Can that be done as an act of will?
No.
So the question of this over-serious interviewer remains, how do we make that transition to simply being a human being?
Sir? What is one of the causes of war? Just a minute. Go into it slowly. What's one of the causes, not the war, is nationalism, right? Russia, America, even the poor little African tribe, it becomes nationalistic. Now, that means separatism. That means conflict, right? Economic, social. So conflict eventually, ultimately, war. I see that. Logically, it is so. So I won't be a national. Finished. Because my intention, my feeling is not to kill somebody. I don't want to kill somebody because my flag, my country, it's nonsense. It's obvious I won't kill. It doesn't need will. It's finished.
But that issue could possibly be finished in one's life. But as you pointed out, the conditioning process is so complex. It goes much beyond nationalism.
So I begin with what I can observe. Logically, I can see the consequence of nationalism. So I begin, say, what are the consequences of, say, I don't know, take any factor of life. Competition. Yeah, there it is. Competition is destroying people, right?
And the human being can simply say, I am not going to engage in competition anymore.
Yes, I mean, simple. If you don't want to compete, you end it. It's not all this fanciful conditioning and all the rest. I don't want to be a rich man, right? Personally, I have no money, but I don't want to be a rich man. I don't go after money. It doesn't require will. There's no temptation. I don't want it.
But now we've talked about various aspects of this whole conditioning process, which you beautifully described as the tide that flows in and out, this vast tide by which we shape the world and the world shapes us. This is something huge. You've pointed to a couple of aspects of it and saying, well, we can drop the desire to be wealthy, we can drop this and that, but can we drop the whole thing?
We don't, sir. We say we can drop it, we don't do it.
But we are capable of doing it, though.
If you want to do anything, you can do it.
So the entire thing, if we wanted to, we could drop the entire conditioning.
Yes, sir. That means you have to learn what this conditioning is, observe the conditioning, look at it. As you look at a precious jewel, look at it. Not run away from it, look at it. As you keep looking at it, it reveals more and more and more. And as you look at it, soon loses its glitter.
So just looking at it.
Of course.
Not escaping from it or changing it, just looking at it.
Not trying to escape from it or transcend it or suppress it. You say, there it is. So have you ever taken a jewel in your hand, really precious diamond, and looked at it for a long time? As you look at it, you see all the glitter, all the light, the play of light and the beauty, the color. As you look at it, you say, yes, it's lovely, but what?
I must admit that I consider you a kind of precious jewel, and I'm looking at you, and you're beginning to disappear right in front of my eyes.
I hope not.
It is direct and simple the way you express it, but I feel that it's something of your own. It's being in the presence of someone like yourself who has dropped the entire conditioned realm. It helps one see the possibility, but
it can be done.
The very fact that you say it is a transmission of energy.
It can be done. If one human being does it, the others can do it.
Is it something for special adepts or advanced beings, or can anyone do that?
It's not a biological freak. You're not some kind of strange sport in the ordinary, not in the biological sense. One has thought a great deal about, lived it, gone into it. You follow? It's like a human being said, please, I don't want to be famous. You're not famous. I don't want to become something great. You may make me great, but I don't want it.
the core of it seems to be that I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to be self-centered. That seems to be the core.
That's a very complex problem, sir. You can't just say, I don't want to be selfish. It means nothing. What is the nature of the self? What is the structure of it? That to inquire into that requires tremendous attention, which is, I begin to inquire or observe what is selfishness in my relationship to another. In my relationship, intimate or not, I observe in that relationship how I behave, how I'm always thinking subtly behind all the words, my own fulfillment, my own desires, my own passions. So there is no relationship. Each is pursuing his own line, like two railway lines never meeting.
That seems to me, at least, to be the essence of the problem. That vast inquiry into the self, into the self.
The self, sir. You know, the Greeks said it, know thyself. The Hindus have put it, same thing in different words. And one has not gone into it profoundly. They said, know yourself. That has been the repetition of words. But to say, look, I'm going to find out what is the self, can I know it? What does it mean to know? You should begin to unfold like an onion, peel after peel, and at the end of it there is nothing left.
And then there's love.
Wait, sir. You can't say that till you have done it.
Well, you've done it. If you hadn't done it, then this conversation would be meaningless. If I was talking to someone who just speculated about this possibility, it would be a waste of time to talk about it.
Of course,
the important thing is now to have a conversation with someone who can attest to the fact that it is possible and can be done.
But that requires a great deal of inquiry, observation, deep honesty, real honesty, not to be hypocrite. Don't say anything that you don't mean it. Don't say one thing and do another. Think one thing, do quite the opposite. You follow, sir? It requires real the strength of humility.
Many people feel that there must be some sort of practice, some sort of method that they can apply to this situation to eradicate selfishness.
We talked about it the other day when we had the seminar. When you have a system, obviously you practice. You follow it. And that makes the mind more dull, more stupid than it is.
More repetitive.
Yeah, it's important.
So it is simply the action of observing.
Yes, sir. Observing without any motive, without any direction. Motive is generally some selfish reason. And if you have a motive, it gives you a direction to the observation. Like a real scientist, if he has a motive, he is not. You may be government scientist, but he's not a scientist.
Is this motiveless action, is it really action or is it non-action? I'm not trying to play with words, I'm trying to understand.
Sir, have you ever done, not you, I'm not being personal, I'm just inquiring, have you ever done anything without motive? Wait a minute. Say for instance, all right. To be totally unattached, not to be attached. Psychologically, inwardly, can you be free of all attachment?
Well, Krishnaji, you said earlier, though, that one must have an intense concern
No, I'm just
for
asking.
humanity. Is that attachment?
No, just a minute, sir. Intense, what did you say?
Concern.
Concern. Now, that may be a selfish motive. That may be, cover up, a smoke screen for my self-expression.
But that intense concern could also be motiveless.
It all depends if one is profoundly honest.
That the human being is capable of being profoundly honest is
Yes,
is extremely important.
We are such hypocrites. Right? We have got so many masks we put on. We never are free without a single mask. To have no mask at all is really freedom. Is it time to?
Yes, I think that is certainly the essence of the matter. Thank you, Krishnaji.